The Southern African Development Community, SADC members, have agreed to send a technical mission to Mozambique to stop acts of terrorism perpetrated against innocent civilians in Cabo Delgado. SABC's Daniel Kidjo has more.
After 2 days of meetings between heads of state and regional security experts, the SADC leaders have called for an immediate technical deployment to Mozambique. The plan is to meet again at the end of April once the technical group has shared its findings. Many people died and thousands were displaced after last month's attacks in Palma. The UN recently in a statement accused Tanzania of denying access to some Mozambicans who had fled the violence. Tanzanian officials say they have secured the border and that towns like Mtwara that are located near Mozambique are safe. About a month ago, the U.S. government blocked all property and interest in property held by alleged Tanzanian Abu Yassi Hassan and the ISIS Mozambique group. U.S. citizens were also prohibited from engaging in any transactions with Mr. Hassan. However, police in Tanzania say they haven't received a report on the decision and that they are checking their databases to establish the identity of the man in question believed to have passed away. The Tanzanian government, represented at a meeting by Zanzibar's President Hussein Mwinyi, is yet to release a statement on exactly what kind of military or diplomatic action it will take. SABC's Daniel Kidjo in Dar es Salaam.
Willem Els is Senior Training Coordinator on Terrorism for the Institute for Security Studies. He joins us now via Zoom. Willem, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Earlier in the week, we spoke about this SADC gathering, and they were speaking in code. Is it any clearer today exactly what's going to happen next?
Good evening, Peter. Yes, I think after the initial coded message that they sent about the technical deployment, President Mnangagwa actually mentioned that the SADC standby force will be getting ready to intervene. But we also know that these people will not just move in. And I normally compare that with a soccer match. You always analyze your opponent, and then you work out a strategy on how to overpower them or how to win them, and then you select your best team, and then you practice. These guys cannot just move in. You cannot throw together a bunch of soldiers from South Africa and Botswana and other countries and just send them in to go and fight. They will have to practice. So it is something that will not just happen overnight. So what we believe is there might be a gradual deployment where they might deploy some special forces to do some certain things, as well as then other specialist forces to perform some of these tasks before the complete force will be ready to actually move in.
Do they have time? Do they have the luxury of time? Given what's been playing out in the last few weeks, one would think that this is an emergency.
Peter, time is not their friend, unfortunately so. We see that we're also approaching Ramadan now, the month of Ramadan, where they traditionally will be a bit more passive. So we hope that will actually reduce the amount of attacks in order to allow the SADC force to prepare. That is a challenge for us because, as I mentioned, you can't just send them in. Then you will send them. It will be futile to just send them in. We saw that this group is very well prepared, they are well organized, well structured, and they work with a plan. So they have been in recent months, I would say since the middle of last year, they really upped their game, and we could see that they are there with a purpose. They know what they do, they are directed in what they're doing. So we will have to come up with a very good strategy and a plan. Otherwise, we might end up in the same way than the Mozambique's forces have ended up.
Typically, how are these regional forces put together, and who gets put in charge?
That is something that will be negotiated depending on the plan, depending on the needs analysis or the threat analysis that will be done. They're going to see what country has got where their strong points and what country can then provide with those expertise that they will need. South Africa, we know that they are severely challenged in terms of equipment and so on, if we look at recent reports, because of a cut in funding. But we also know that even though Botswana has got a much smaller army or defense force, they are really well prepared and well trained. So I think that even given that President Masisi is currently the head of the Troika, he will push for his people to be there, to be represented, and then they're going to look at all the other countries, what they can afford and what they can contribute towards this, because you need certain expertise, and they will have to draw that expertise from the region.
These militants have had very little resistance for the past 3 years, one would say. I guess they're feeling quite emboldened about their might, their abilities, but this might be a different game once properly set up.
You are right. I think their tails are in the air. They really did well in terms of their perspective. We see that, as you mentioned, that the resistance from the military, the police, was not what it could have been. It was quite uncoordinated. We also see that the private mercenary group DAG has withdrawn. Their contract was ended, so they don't have air support at the moment. Now we know South Africa has got a few of our attack helicopters that can be deployed. Some of them are deployed in the DRC. I do not know how many are serviceable. So we will look at those things, because if we do not go in with a good plan, we're going to end up in the same way as the Mozambicans, and also as the Russians that went in the beginning, and we could see that they were not well planned, their strategy was not well worked out, and they suffered the consequences.
So if this regional force does get put together and go in there, they'll be flying a regional flag rather than individual countries. But I suspect that these militants are not going to see them as one regional team, but will be marking off these countries individually as enemies. Might that have consequences for citizens in those countries?
That is very true, Peter. We will have to look at the history. We saw when Kenya moved into Somalia, they were warned not to move in. They did move in. And the mistake they made is they did not prepare a well-coordinated plan back home in order to counter what the consequences might be. So I would urge that these countries that are going to deploy, as they will undoubtedly be a target of these groups, we see that they come from many of these countries, they hail from many of these countries. So these countries will have to have a plan, an action plan in place before they move in order to protect their citizens.
And when you're fighting people that are motivated, it becomes exceptionally difficult, and it can be one of those prolonged, long, drawn-out affairs. I mean, we could be setting up a Vietnam scenario.
It is very possible. We will have to look at the plan, if it's a well-coordinated plan. And as we said so many times, it must be a plan that is holistic, that will also address the other grievances of the local people. Then it might work. We see that a pure military plan has never worked in Africa in countering these type of insurgencies. So we have to learn from that, the mistakes being made, and I think it is doable. But also, as you said, it might take a long time. And the efficiency of how this counteroffensive will work out will depend on how well the plan is and how well they draw from previous experiences, not only in South Africa or in Southern Africa, but the rest of Africa and the world.
I think I may have asked you this question earlier in the week, but I guess as we're seeing this movement, it appears as if Mozambique is now very open to the idea of getting help from outside. They were quite particular about their sovereignty up until now, but things have escalated too much, I guess.
I think you are right. I think that Palma and the attack on Palma was a game changer. I think that the fact that Total has and put everything on ice, the fact that the American investors also put this on ice, what could have been almost a $100 billion in profit that might have come their way, they might end up with about 5% at the moment with the remaining investors that are there. So that card that has been up their sleeve that made them very strong because of the huge amount of money that was going to come their way, that is gone. It is gone with Palma, it is gone with Total that put everything on ice. So they are not as strong as they were 2 or 3 weeks ago. So they were forced actually to, or their hand was forced to actually cooperate better with SADC. I also think that there's a tremendous amount of pressure from the AU and the international community, maybe the UN, on SADC to really come forward with some decisive action. And I think they put also quite a lot of pressure on the government of Mozambique to cooperate for the better of the people.
All right, so we know that there are 3 parties involved in managing and fighting this insurgency. There's the insurgents themselves, the Mozambican army, and of course this Dyke Consulting that's been contracted. What would happen to somebody like Dyke Consulting once the SADC setup is put into play?
Well, yeah, the DAG group or the Dyke Consultancy Group, their contract has been terminated or has not been renewed. So they actually withdrew, and we know that they still got some contracts in assisting with the anti-poaching operations in some of the game parks in Mozambique. So they will continue with that. They will not be involved with this, but we also know that the Paramount Group, also a South African group, was contracted by the military in order to help. They also provided them with some Gazelle helicopters, and there are also some helicopters that are being flown by some Ukrainian pilots that will have to fill the shoes of the DAG group, because you cannot move into an operation like this without efficient air support.
Willem Els, always great talking to you. Thanks so much indeed, and your insights greatly appreciated. Thanks for joining us tonight.